Are there any comments or questions about the town budget or bonding proposals? First, the public. No questions, no comments. The board. Jonathan.
I guess my first comment would be that the budget is fairly exceptional. I think the increases have decreased over the years from probably 4 or 5% increases now down to an increase that's below 2. The increase below 2 is, I believe it's below the current inflation rate and the 5-year average inflation rate. While at the same time, from what I understand, it fully funds all our pensions. So there's quite a bit of good news, but in all fairness, I do have naturally the same concern that I have for the Board of Education budget, and that goes back to public wage inflation. I do see that has been reined in significantly. It is also underneath the annual inflation rate and the 5-year inflation rate. But I do wonder if you have any concerns or, any comments or strategies to rein in an imbalance I see in private and public wage inflation over the years to come.
I guess the first thing I can say, John, is that I don't know what's going to happen. In years to come, I would become pretty wealthy if I did. Okay? But in all fairness, we are in negotiations, like I said, with 3 large unions right now. So it kind of restricts me from commenting on where we are, what's on the table. In one case, we haven't really had the first meeting yet, so I can't really say anything on that. But the increases that we did negotiate in the contracts we did settle, as you said, were extremely fair and within line. There is the Teamsters contract was particularly fair, I think, to the town. I can't really comment much more on that. The Teamsters have ratified. The agreements have not been signed.
I only have one more. My last question goes to capital spending. Mm-hmm. I've since the beginning of my term, I've kind of advocated that we should let as much debt expire to the best extent that we can and prioritize capital projects because our biggest capital investment is really right around the corner to build the Guilford High School. And by doing so, we can mitigate the impact on taxpayers when it comes time to make those debt payments for the high school. And I just have some concerns about some of the capital spending and if it's a nice to have or if it's what's the urgency of it. And then I guess a specific question about alternative energy funding, which I believe we've been doing for a couple of years now. And I'm wondering where some of those funds are going and if they're making a difference.
Okay, actually those are pretty good questions. Let me start off to say that as far as the funding we're going to have to deal with for the high school, about $64 million, that's one of the reasons we try to refund and refinance to mitigate that debt service, okay? We can't refund enough to make up for all of that, you got to be honest with you. But we're getting $100 or $90 million building, which is long overdue, number one. Number two, is it the right time to incur more debt? It is, because the rates are so low, number one. Number two, we can't afford to wait. I don't know how long you've been in town, but we waited and waited, and I sat on this board, and I guess I was probably a lot like you at one time, wanted to cut, and we would look to the capital expenditures because it was easy. You weren't hurting anybody. But you know what? We hurt ourselves because now we're paying for it. Now we're buying equipment which we had, if we had bought maybe 5-10 years ago, wouldn't have been as expensive as we have to, that would cost us now. Plus the maintenance on the equipment we have, I'm going to pick on Public Works because they have the oldest 25 and 30-year-old equipment. Even though we've been making good inroads on replacing their equipment over the last couple of years. There's a lot of equipment to replace. You can't do it all at once. So I would not recommend us going in the opposite direction. I think we've got to keep moving forward. And as much as we can spend from the operating budget would be to our benefit. I agree with you there. The strategies that I see in the future would be to rely less and less on bond money for trucks, for instance, and put it more into operating. So I hope that answers your question. And you're asking one about energy, excuse me.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
the only other part.
The energy, we put in $200,000 a year at the request of the Energy Task Force. They actually wanted $2 million bonding issue by themselves, and I didn't think that was a prudent way to go, and the Board of Selectmen agreed with me about 3 years ago. So what we did, we put $1 million aside in the capital budget, $200,000 for 5 years. We will be using that money on energy-saving items. For instance, the town hall. The town hall right now has oil-fired furnaces. This past summer, the gas company put a gas line down Park Street that would make it very advantageous for us and our neighbors to start using natural gas at a considerable savings. So the cost of those new furnaces are going to come out of that $200,000 that's been allocated. And for other projects that come along, we don't know as we go forward what sort of energy improvements are going to come about in the way of equipment that we could take advantage of. By having this fund, and it really is a fund, we're putting away the dollars now for the future. Okay? But we are going to start to use that money. Okay?
Are there any?
Can I just clarify something Jonathan said, and if Joe wants to jump in? Just, it's semantics more than anything, but it's important. You mentioned that this budget fully funds the pensions, and that's not true.
I said fully
No,
covers.
you didn't say it. Jonathan said it.
Oh, he said that.
Fully funded
Okay.
the pensions, and so I just wanted to clarify, the pensions will not be fully funded. We are fully funding the actuary's annual recommendation for
You got it.
contributions.
You got it.
I'm sorry, Kim,
So,
that's correct.
okay.
So for anyone.
I didn't say
who-
that.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Right, but it's
Communicate. Thank you.
semantics enough, it's a big difference.
Yeah, to fund, to have a zero unfunded liability is a
Right,
little bit
absolutely.
unrealistic.
That
yeah.
would be some very.
But each year, to trim the budget, we had to shave that a little bit.
Absolutely,
Now we've made up for all of it.
absolutely. All set?
You stole that from me, but, and I guess I have another clarification as well, Joe, which is the overall budget that being put forward from the town, which includes the operating budget and capital, is this 1.96%, and that is absolutely a tremendous number, and you're definitely responsible for both parts of that. The town side is responsible for the debt service, and in some years, that's kicked us around a little bit.
Yeah, it has,
And this year, as a result of a lot of hard work from the finance department and your office for sure, and, we're taking advantage of a tremendous, interest rate environment. We've been able to drive that number down. But the operating increase is 4.63%. Okay? And I just want to get a little bit of an understanding of the components of that. We had a little bit of an explanation from the school side as to what their expense drivers are.
Right.
And it's in our presentation, and I have it, but if you could just kind of give us a little bit, explain why, well, and one of the big things, obviously, is this pension number at $772,000. I mean, that's a good portion of that
That
increase.
pretty much wipes out the savings on the debt service.
Right, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of a compound question, too, because I want to go to another point that Jonathan made, and I don't mean to be directing all these references back, but he made a comment earlier about public sector wage inflation, and the wage increase in your budget, even at this 4.63%, is only $267,337. Right? Those are contractual increases on a total budget of $30 million.
Correct.
You have, 267,000. So, I mean, do you see that? Do you perceive that there's any, in Guilford at least, a risk with public sector wage inflation?
No.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to be lumped in with what's happening in Washington, as Mr. Bloss said, and frankly, maybe even in Hartford.
No.
I
If you look at the CCM data reports that come out monthly, and if you look at negotiated contracts, and you look at arbitrated union contracts, we're right where we should be as far as what's going on in the rest of the state. Okay.
appreciate it.
Okay.
I think I may want to comment on that as well. You can look at the wage inflation issue in a lot of ways, but when I look at it relative to the private sector's wage increases, which have actually decreased, and their median income has gone down. So it's really a relative argument as opposed to trying to perhaps say that 2% is some kind of outrageous increase. It's not, but there's an imbalance in public and private sector wages. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics puts the average difference in public compensation and private compensation at about 43% higher for the public sector. So this is an issue that resounds among residents that I speak with, and a lot of them ask when public sector employees will have to face the same realities that they're facing.
John, if I can answer that, you want to ask me?
got it.
Okay. If I can answer that, first of all, under our new agreements and the agreements we're working on, without saying too much more, they are right in line with private sector. Now, the thing about private sector, you got to remember, if a company is not doing well, a manufacturer is not making enough green widgets, he can shut down his green widget line. I can't shut down the fire department. I can't shut down the police department. Government has to operate. I mean, I caught a lot of flack from some of our employees that I opened up town hall Monday after the blizzard. I says, government has to work. We always have to be there. Again, back to my second slide, for the protection and safety of the town and its people. So if you look at the private sector, they're, I was in business, okay? When things are not going well, you cut, and you're not selling a product because it's not selling, so you're not making the product, I should say. I can't cut a product line here. So what we try to do, the next best thing, is deal with our employees in a fair way and getting a fair wage for them and for the town.
Go ahead, Louis.
John, I just don't want to let a statistic like that pass. You cite the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we could spend an enormous amount of time getting underneath that number, of what period of time it covers, when it started, when it ended, and we've been through conversations like that in the past with statistics that you used in the past. What jobs comprise this comparison, that there's some private sector employee making 43% less than some public sector employee? So what period of time, what jobs, what location? We live in Connecticut. I'm not particularly interested in comparing Connecticut wages to, frankly, most of the rest of the country. As you go into the Midwest and the South, there's plenty of places where perfectly acceptable middle-class living standards are considerably less than life in Connecticut. When this report was actually produced would be sort of useful. So to quote a statistic like that, let it hang out here and let it in some fashion affect our deliberations is really, in my estimation, not all that different from just sort of suggesting you have, in your pocket the list of 73, overpaid public employees. I mean, it doesn't do me any good to understand the work our employees are doing and how our selectmen and our school board are, trying to manage all these numbers. What I'm interested in are the specific numbers for our specific employees and the value we're getting for the work they're doing. So,
Louis makes some
just a
good
rebuttal.
points. These are national numbers. But instead of quabbling over statistics, do you believe that private sector wages are increasing?
I believe they're increasing. Again, depends on when,
It depends
where.
It depends on what industry you're in. It depends
Sure.
on what service you're in.
I suspect if you're in the oil business right now in North Dakota, you're doing pretty well. So, the economy is a living, breathing entity. It's enormous in the United States. Some people are making money, some people are hurting. Medical, the medical business is very volatile. There's a lot of people, working there. There's a lot of people getting laid off in other industries.
Okay, gentlemen, I think we're now getting into the economy at large. We can cut this
Well,
back.
Mr. Gammon, if I could.
Go ahead.
I have 2 questions for Joe, but I do want to address something that, and Jonathan was not on the board when I did this about 4 years ago. I think it was at this table around this time that I mentioned something about the way my business was doing. And I'm in a professional services business, and in 2008, 2009, 2010, we cut half our staff. I was a principal of that office. In the last 3 years, we've rebuilt professional services. We've doubled our size. We're back to 1 short of where we have been, maximum. And yes, I did get an increase. And I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky we've done well. I have heard from probably very similar people from you, residents of this town, that have said that salary increases they're not improving, they're not getting better. I don't know if that is the majority. 3 years ago, I could say that was the majority, and I don't want to say that I don't care about those people that have had no increases. But I certainly think economy is doing better. I don't think we're out of it. I think there's still a lot of skepticism. But to rely on, I'm sorry, I'm looking around this room, and, there's 35 people in it. Are there anybody else, who's from the public, who's not a town employee, somebody who's on the board, who's interested in this budget? I don't see anybody from the public really here complaining. And maybe they'll come out in droves at 200 people at the public workshop. And that's part of something that I'll probably close with on Thursday night. I want 100% of the people involved in this town to be voting on this budget, because it is frustrating every single year. She's been right there every year too, I think. Kim, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but every single year, hardly anyone comes out for the budget, and then there's people that complain that the budget passes at increases that are keeping the services of the town. And shoot me, if people don't like it, that's fine. But it frustrates me to hear all the time, it's not getting better, it's not getting better, it's not getting better. And I usually don't go off on a little bit of a tangent like this on TV, on camera, in front of a bunch of people. But I'm hearing from the same people saying, how could you increase taxes? Well, you know what? The services in this town are vital and they're valuable. And I've heard you say, there's value. And I do have 2 questions, by the way. For you. Regarding the pension fund, I guess there's 2 things we're kind of picking on: pension and capital a little bit. But on the pension, you had mentioned that the debt service, of course, has gone down, and the pension, bringing it up to the recommended 100%, the level recommended 100%. Could you explain a little bit why it's so important that we can't just go at 80% or 86% or 90% of what we've done in the past, and we have to go 100 this year? Because that would be a difference in the operating budget.
Yeah, it would be. The problem is that some of our funds within the pension fund are not funded where they should be, okay? Particularly the police, because of changes in the pension agreement, pension fund, that is really not funded where it should be. And as a matter of fact, last year, when we cut $207,000 from the recommended contribution, we made sure that the cuts went to the other segments of the pension plan, not to the police, because they were so underfunded. Okay.
So there's a danger to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Not only that, it's not only a danger where we are with unfunded liabilities. I mean, we're a lot better than some other towns if you've read the paper lately. Okay, I don't want to pick on anybody. But the fact is the rating agencies look to that too. And as John said before, we're very shortly going to be going out to bond, within a year, I say shortly, on the new school, we want to make sure that we've got our numbers as good as we can get them with what we have to work with. And that's just another component of it. Okay.
One last question, one small one. The decision between whether you put, there's a couple of capital operating line items, for a couple of public works vehicles.
Right.
How did you decide, and I know there's a long-term 5-year plan.
Right.
How do you decide which went into operation and which goes into bonding?
It was basic.
And I'm sorry, let me lead you a little
Okay.
bit. Is it based on priority? Is it a threshold amount that you were trying to set?
It's mainly a threshold amount. The smaller vehicles, the $105,000 vehicle, we put into operating.
But you're trying to work up to a number.
Exactly.
Which is the $1 million number which you mentioned before. So it's just a matter of just increasing it as opposed to, well, it's a priority and we have to put it there.
When we bond the first couple of years, those same trucks were probably in a bonding, because we keep them so long, too.
I have a question really more a request for comment. The last expense driver in the budget that's been presented to us that we didn't talk about really are medical benefits, which is, again, frankly, not a terrible number. And can you give us, it's 100, I'll just read it, I have it in front of me here, it's 126,742 on the size of this budget. That's really, truly impressive. Can you just give us a little comment on what are some of the factors keeping us that positive figure, even though that is an increase, one of the numbers increasing our overall operating budget relative to where other medical expense hits have been in previous years? That's really pretty good.
Well, actually, not to pick on any other towns, but we have some towns that I work with that are at 12, 15% increases. We're at less than 5. Okay.
How is that?
I think it's because of the good operating performances we had. We are requiring more contributions from our employees as we go into, or higher contributions, as we go into our labor contracts. And Rich, you want to add anything to that? Yeah. He's the expert on the matter. I'll let him do it.
Good evening, Mitch Goldblatt, Director of Human Resources. There's a couple, to answer your question, Lou, there's a few answers to that question. First of all, we are self-funded, and we have done a better job, I believe, of keeping our own costs down. Our employees are putting more towards their contributions. Each of the contracts has raised the amount, so it does take some of the pressure off the town. I would like to think that our wellness programs are paying off, that our employees, for the most part, are healthier and taking preventive care to keep some of the more catastrophic illnesses down as well. So, I mean, I think we're doing the right things. We're in the right direction. We've worked with our providers. We have looking for ways to keep these costs down. We're a long way from what's considered a consumer-driven healthcare, where there's more responsibility on employees than employer. But in the public sector, we're pretty much where we're at with the PPO system. Yeah, Kim.
Have you factored in any changes on January 1st, 2014?
Yes. Yes, the Affordable Care Act has been taken into consideration from our providers. There is some increases that will hit January 1st, which for this year makes that a half-year increase.
Right.
So we're going to see the full brunt of that a year from now. So yes, there are some increases there, but once again, we've been, fortunate somewhat. We've had some illnesses that have been catastrophic. We also have stop-loss insurance we put forward, which helps control our costs as well.
Are there a large number of employees that will be eligible for health care that aren't now because of the changes in the number of hours?
That issue is one that has not been thoroughly answered. I can't get a straight answer from what Kim is referring to is under the Affordable Care Act that people who average 30 hours a week are going to be eligible for health care insurance. And we offer the health care for those that we consider at 30 hours a week. The federal government's a definition of 30 hours a week we have to look into further. I'm trying to get the right answer. We've had the different seminars I've been to have given different answers. I think we'll be safe. There is a possibility that there are certain employees may be, under the new law, eligible for health care that we do not insure at this time. There's also the big question of the health care exchanges offered by the state government and whether people will move to that as well. So there's a lot of open-ended questions with the Affordable Care Act that we're constantly getting different information almost daily about things that are happening, and it's going to continue, and it's going to be in a state of flux for a couple of years, and we're going to see how it all plays out.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing is to mention that we have to cover for 30 hours or more. Right now, anyone who works 24 hours or more gets benefits.
Okay.
So it's in there already. Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board, from the public? Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I hope we did have some members of the public here in addition to members of the various boards and commissions and so forth. And I would like to remind everyone that the Board of Finance will be meeting again on Thursday for a workshop meeting, and that workshop meeting could very well recommend the budget to go forward, and the public is welcome to participate, and there will be opportunities for such participation at that meeting, and that's Thursday night. The board will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
Nice job, Ken.
Very good, Ken.